whenever our own government is out buying billions of rounds of ammunition, the Department of Homeland Security buying billions of rounds of ammunition. I mean, they don't have a foreign mandate. They have a domestic mandate. So it's not like they're going to be over there killing those evil Muslims. They're going to be coming after regular folk, so to speak.
Well, I've been saying this for a long time, ever since Bush started bringing in all these laws about Guantanamo and detention without trial and illegal wiretapping. The sort of nudge, wink line that the United States government's been giving us is, well, yeah, we got all these tyrannical laws now, but you don't have to worry. They will only be used against dark-skinned foreign Muslims and on foreign soil. And no, we would never do this to American citizens. And, of course, they're doing it to American citizens. And now Obama, to my astonishment, has appropriated to himself, through the National Defense Authorization Act, the right to kill American citizens at will without trial. And he has actually exercised that so-called right of his. Now, again, true, so far it's only been with dark-skinned Muslims on foreign soil. But the fact is that all of these laws, the killing and the detention without trial and the illegal wiretapping and the constant spying and basically the suspension of habeas corpus, which is what Abraham Lincoln tried during the Civil War without success, all of this stuff, once they get these laws onto the books, there is no guarantee that they will not be used against Baptist good old boys in Alabama with rifle racks on their pickup trucks. Once we allow the federal government to appropriate this kind of power to itself, there is effectively no restraint that we can impose on the federal government to prevent them from using these powers against us, other, of course, than the one that we won't use, which is the one I discuss in my novels, direct armed resistance against the government and the establishment of our own country here in the North American continent.
Well, that's really the rub of it. But let's ask a question. I look at things like Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano. She recruited some people from East Germany to come in and help her structure her department, and namely a gentleman named Marcus Wolf and another one named Eric Mueller. She recruited those two guys to come into the U.S. and to help her put together a police state, and she did, and that's what we've got. Then you look at what these fusion centers have come up with and how they're monitoring every cell phone call, all internet traffic, everything. And do you know what they've discovered? There are no terrorists in the U.S. There's none. They can't find a justification for these billions of dollars of budget. And then you watch and you look and you say, my gosh, they've ordered billions of rounds of .40 caliber hollow point ammunition, which is illegal under the Geneva Convention for Homeland Security. And what's the only conclusion you can reach is that they're planning on using this on the American people.
Well, I've mentioned this in my own podcast, Radio Free Northwest, but in this country, ever since 9/11, anti-terrorism has become a multi-billion-dollar industry as far as appropriation of federal budget goes. And if you work for or with the United States government, that's always the name of the game, control of the money. Who gets the money? Who gets how much money? So the thing is, without terrorists, there can't be anti-terrorists. There can't be these billion-dollar budgets, and so if there are no terrorists out there, then the feds just have to make them. This is how you get the FBI committing moral atrocities like the Edgar Steele case, and now doing this stuff about they'll get some poor little Apu from the Quickie Mart, and they'll convince him that he is surrounded by an Al-Qaeda cell of 4 or 5 guys, all of whom are federal informants, and the FBI provides him with a so-called explosive belt or a car bomb with inert substances, of course. The FBI sets up this whole so-called terrorist case from beginning to end. They arrest the poor schmuck, and they drag him in front of a court, and judges are now acknowledging in public that the FBI fabricates these so-called terrorist cases. And it says, well, yeah, but he had the intent to do it anyway, so bang, 25 years.
Well,
it's a joke.
You bring up a great point about that, because if you go back to the World Trade Center bombing that happened during the Clinton administration, and you go back to that era in time, and that was indeed an FBI operation, and the confidential informant who the FBI involved was told that the bomb material was going to be, inert, and it turned out to be very real. And the FBI really set that thing up. So
I think that's what happened in Oklahoma City as well.
Well, I think Oklahoma City's a little more complex on that one as well, but I think you're right. We can come right back to that in just a few minutes because we've got a break coming up here, and we'll be right back in a few minutes. Thank you. With the music already. Let's stop it. I mean, come on. There we go. Okay, now our guest today is author Harold Covington. Harold, welcome back.
Okay.
Anyway, like I said, I really urge everyone listening to get a copy of your books. And the first one was Hill of the Ravens, and it really gives you that's one where they were ambushed, if I recall, and one of the flying columns was wiped out because of traitors.
It opens with that scene, yeah.
All of these books, you can read them in order, you can read them out of order. They all make sense about what needs to be done if we're going to salvage at least a portion of this country in a way that we as Americans have grown up. I mean, you and I are about the same age. We grew up in a different era. I mean, back when police officers were really peace officers, and they weren't enforcement thugs like they are now. I mean, we had guys like, Andy Mayberry, and that's really how the local cops were treated. They were friendly, they were cordial, they knew who was who, they knew what was what, and they didn't have this attitude. Yeah. And the attitude really came in whenever Chertoff became Secretary of Homeland Security, who was a dual Israeli citizen. And he came in and brought in this whole Israeli mindset of how to train our police officers, and they're really treating the American people like they treat Palestinians in Israel now.
So the police are becoming militarized. I notice Department of Homeland Security and the federal government is loading them up with all kinds of fancy new equipment, armored cars and body armor and automatic weaponry and that sort of stuff. If you're like 7 or 8 man department in Moose Jaw, Idaho or something like that, you don't need all this stuff. But this is especially happening here in the Northwest and in other largely rural areas of the country, in other words, predominantly white areas of the country. The police are being militarized, and in essence, they're being placed under a central command. I think it's a way to get around the Posse Comitatus Act, which forbids the use of American troops against American civilians. So when it hits the fan, they're not going to be using troops against the population. They're going to be using militarized police to a large extent whose loyalties have been corrupted and whose minds have been brainwashed and so forth and so on.
That's one thing Obama came out and said. He came out and said that he wanted to have a civilian force that was armed as well as the military. Mm-hmm. And it appears that they're well on their way to doing this.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, in addition to getting around the Posse Comitatus Act, it means that when the government decides to move, they can, in essence, order armed forces directly against the American population, and they won't have to go through the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the generals at the Pentagon and some of these, old red, white, and blue Marine types who might object to using armed force against the... that was basically how the first Civil War began. People think it began at Fort Sumter. That's not totally true. Fort Sumter was provoked by the fact that Abraham Lincoln called for 100,000 volunteers specifically to use force against the South. That was what triggered the actual fighting. There is no question that Americans today have to fear the intentions of the United States government because the United States government is no longer in their hands. It represents the Democrat special interest groups. It represents the liberal fringe. The American government has lost all touch with genuine American values and with the original white Americans who made this country what it was. And so, yes, we need to be afraid of them and we need to fear their intentions.
Well, you bring up an interesting point because we're always told the old argument, which is really a facetious argument about, we're all immigrants. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not an immigrant.
No.
My family's lived here at least 8 generations. I've got the records to prove it in my possession. And if I believe what Ancestry.com tells me, my family's lived here 12 generations. And so I don't think I'm an immigrant, but we're fed that Marxist line that we're all immigrants, and we are not. Some of us were born here, and our fathers were born here, and our grandfathers and their grandfathers before them. And our people made this country what it is, and we're being overrun. We've got 50 million illegal aliens living in this country who do not belong here and need to be deported. And Reagan betrayed the American people by not following the Eisenhower precedent and deporting these people. But they're here because American business wants them here. It's cheaper for them to hire illegal aliens than it is to hire Americans.
Yeah.
We've offshored our jobs.
Well, Democrats and Republicans are just as bad. They share the guilt as far as immigration goes. The Republicans, who are basically in the pocket of big business, want these people here to provide cheap labor and undercut the wages that they have to pay their American workers. And so by increasing the labor pool, this is another reason they brought in feminism and that sort of stuff in order to bring millions of women into the workforce. The more labor you've got, basically, the less you have to pay. And so Republicans want them here for the cheap labor. Democrats want them here in order to get them registered to vote and put them into perpetual power. This is what's coming in the next Obama term. He has already effectively given them amnesty. He's ordered the ICE to stop deporting illegals. He has instituted what they call the DREAM Act by presidential decree after Congress rejected it twice. And in certain places like Chicago, they are already registering at least hundreds of thousands of these people to vote, which is illegal. But see, Obama has discovered something which other presidents might have suspected, but they never actually acted on. Obama has discovered that he can violate the law and violate the Constitution, and nothing will be done about it. His DREAM Act by decree was absolutely, totally illegal, totally unconstitutional. His assumption of the right to kill American citizens without trial was, again, totally unconstitutional, and nobody's raised so much as a whisper of protest other than a few days of muttering on the blogs. And so you've got a government in power right now that is willing and able to violate the law and violate the Constitution. I personally am of the belief that illegal aliens have, in fact, been voting in this country for many years, but just basically the law simply isn't being enforced. California is a case in point. So, in essence, the big aim of the Obama second term will be to formalize the legalization of these millions of illegals in this country, to give them the vote, and that's it. The Republicans will never again see the inside of the Oval Office, and we will be reduced to a minority population in our own land, and the Republicans will be reduced to a minority party, and will become, in essence, a one-party state, something similar to the PRI in Mexico that ruled Mexico for 60 or 70 years. That's what's coming. The Republicans have finally, at the 11th hour, awakened to this fact that they are desperately trying to stop it with these photo voter ID laws, which the Democrat judges and the Democrat courts are just striking down right, left, and center in a desperate attempt to get all their dead voters and their illegal voters to vote on November the 6th. And so it's kind of coming down to the wire here. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I may be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I personally think Obama is going to be reelected because, number one, the Democrats are going to practice massive vote fraud on November the 6th, like they did in 2008 with Acorn. And number two, I hate to say it, but I think Rush Limbaugh may be onto something. It's gotten to the point where normal white people are simply outnumbered in this country. And with the Electoral College, you only have to get about 6 or 7 of the larger states, the minority-heavy states with the big cities, and you've got the presidency. So I hate to be a Eeyore here, but I personally believe that Obama will be reelected. He's going to legalize those illegals. They're going to start voting, and normal white people from this point on can, in essence, kiss the old America goodbye because we're going to be simply outnumbered.
Well, that is a sad fact, and I have been a strong opponent of both legal and illegal immigration for a very long time. I did a 5-week series with Frosty Woldridge on my show. He was on every Wednesday for 5 weeks leading up to this election, trying to get people to realize the importance that keeping our native, Native Americans here, meaning American-born Americans. We may be of European ancestry, but we are the ones who made this country. And I also reach out to the black community because as the Hispanics gain political power, the blacks are going to suffer for more and more and more. And there is no love between the black and Mexican communities or Hispanic communities. In fact, there's areas of Los Angeles that the Mexicans have come in illegally, and they have ethnically cleansed and removed the blacks from what had been traditionally black areas for multiple generations, and they have been displaced. And now these blacks have nowhere to go, and they compete with them for jobs. And once the blacks figure out that they are no longer the preferred minority and that their special statuses that they've been given and granted are being removed and reallocated to Hispanic, we're going to have some unhappy blacks in this country. And so the blacks better wake up and figure out that they've got something to lose in this as well. And